Hi, everybody. Welcome to our next lesson. Today, we're going to talk about specific examples of business writing. We're going to look at some examples, and then you're going to get a chance to practice your own. So first of all, let's talk about texting. Oh, texting. All right. We're just going to jump right in. So texting is kind of a tricky subject when it comes to business writing and professional communication. It'll really depend upon the culture of where you are as to whether or not texting is an appropriate means of communication. Certainly, there are circumstances where it only makes sense. For example, if your supervisor is out of the office and has said, keep in touch with me, and then a question comes up and you need an immediate answer, the text, of course. But sometimes you need to default to an email, a letter, something that's a little bit longer so that you have more time to really develop your point. If you do text, make sure that you only use texting for short exchanges and spell out your words, right? The worst is when you get into text abbreviations and then the person doesn't know what you're talking about. So make sure that you spell everything out as best you can. Also, proofread your text before sending. I'm the worst about this. I will send a text and then send it off, and autocorrect has changed one of the words. This happens all day, right? So make sure that you proofread your text. Also, be sure that you recognize that texts are often misinterpreted. Very similar to email, it's hard to tell the tone of someone's voice in a text. And so choose your words as carefully as you can. I wouldn't throw in a whole bunch of emoticons unless you have that relationship with someone, but choose words and use punctuation so that you can begin to convey the tone of your message. Also, it's okay to unplug once in a while, to not be immediately responsive by text. Now, if we're talking about a supervisor, you're going to want to let them know that you're doing this. But remember that you decide how others communicate with you. Not your boss, but other folks, right? If you don't want to have a texting relationship with someone in the office, then respond to them by email or respond by calling back on the phone. But make sure that you are protecting your personal life as much as possible and not just on call 24/7, unless that's the nature of your job. Okay, when it comes to emails, things have really come along since email first began. I remember those days with that awful sound. Should we do it now? Some of you just had a flashback and others of you are like, I have no idea what that is. And you are young. Bless you. So emails have come a long way, mainly because we can now answer emails from our phones, right? When emails first developed, you had to log onto your computer. It was this whole process. And so it was certainly more instant than snail mail, but not quite as instant as it is today. And so emails have really replaced a lot of what were previously printed letters in the business world because it's so much faster. Now, that being said, an email should still be fairly brief. So when you're sitting down to write a business email, here are some tips. First of all, always use a salutation. It drives me nuts when there's not a salutation in the email. Now, the exception is if you're sending a quick email to a friend. For example, Michelle, who's in this class. If I have a quick something for her, we know each other at a friendly level in addition to being colleagues, and so I can just shoot off a quick email to her. However, if I'm going to email, I don't know, Elizabeth Davis, I'm going to use a salutation. Right? When I email my friends, I usually still use a salutation unless this is a really quick exchange back and forth that we're having. So it depends on the audience, as everything does, as to what your salutation should look like. Typically, if it's within the office, it's okay to write something like, "Hi, Michelle," or "Hi, Jeffrey." But if you're sending something outside the office, then "Dear Mrs. So-and-so" or "Dear Mr. So-and-so" is a better way to go about it, just as a general rule of thumb. A lot of times you're going to have to use your best, just your own knowledge to decide, but typically inside the office, it's okay to just say hi or the name with a comma. Outside the office, you want to make sure you use "dear." The subject line should be really brief and very specific, right? Report attached, question regarding vacation time, something like that. Emails are longer than text, but they should still be fairly brief, maybe 3 paragraphs. Also, when you're writing an email, you'll want to use breaks in between the paragraphs. It's the worst, isn't it, to open up an email and it's just this huge chunk of text, right? Use paragraphs and put a space in between them so that visually we can compartmentalize the email. That's really helpful, especially when people work on computers all day long and you're just seeing words and numbers. And so that helps us to focus more when we're reading your email. Also, make sure that you reply as promptly as you can to emails because there is an expectation of quick response. You want to use reply all only when it's actually necessary. I'm sure that we have all received, maybe even been part of, the reply all emails where someone asks a question and then everyone responds to everybody else. And the next thing I know, I walked away for a break and came back to my desk and I have 20 emails of everyone saying, "I'll bring tortilla chips. I'll bring brownies. I'll bring spoons. Do you need to hit reply all?" In some cases, like that one, maybe you do, but there's probably more efficient ways. You don't want to jam up people's mailboxes. We talked a little bit about format before, but I just want to reiterate to avoid using all caps because that's yelling, unless you're yelling. And be very careful with different colored font, bold, underlined, italics, right? Use those sparingly as well. All right. Oh, my son is here. Yes. Yes, you can have a snack. Okay. So in your textbook, you'll see a couple of examples of business emails. So one is sort of a generic, and then the other is more personal. So definitely take a look at those. It's nice to have a signature line in your email. You can set that up through wherever the email provider is. And the signature line would have your name, your position, and then often maybe your email address or phone number for your office, but at least your name and the position. And those are nice to have. They automatically come up on your email and it just reminds everybody of exactly what your position is, so where you're coming from in the communication. It also goes to reiterate that this is in fact a business communication. Okay, so let's talk about memorandums and letters next. I do love a good memo. So a memo is often used for clarification purposes or to communicate a policy. They are almost always to inform. These are raisins. I'll get you some after I finish this video. Here you go. Pardon me. I'm making this video for my class. Do you want to say hi to them? He's going to come say hi. This is Jack. Hi. But you have to come over here so they can see you. Here. Hi. All right, there you go. Off you go. All right, take your raisins. All right, so a memo is meant to inform, and they're often used to provide clarity in many cases when sort of rumors are going around the office or there's a policy change or a situation that there hasn't been a lot of clarity on. But the format of a memo is really important. And there's a sample of this in your textbook. So typically it begins with who the the memo is to. So is it to all employees, to the ERP team, right? And then who it's from. And typically you would have your name and your position or your business, depending on the audience, the date, and then the subject. The subject should be brief, but right to the point, okay? Here's a subject we're addressing, right? Upcoming furlough, for example, right? Then you'll have an introduction, which just provides background. It can be really short. I'm talking like a couple sentences, just that provides background on the decision that's been made. And then you have the announcement. And when you're writing a memo, if it's appropriate, it's nice to use bullet points or a list to set off the specific details of your announcement or your policy change. Visually, that helps people compartmentalize and really focus on the specifics of what this means for them. And then there will be a conclusion of some kind, which is more of the emotional appeal part, right? Please understand that the committee has spent countless hours brainstorming various situations, and we've decided that this is the decision that will best benefit the most people on the team. Okay? So those are the pieces of a memo. They're pretty short, typically about a page. Always remember your audience, right? If you're the one that's making the decision and writing the memo, then remember that you've made a decision that will impact others. So just keep that in mind when you're writing the memo, right? You don't want to come across as really heavy-handed or not caring about the effects of the announcement. So keep the audience in mind. Make sure that you use a professional and formal tone always in a memo, because this is directly related to a business decision. And then you want to make sure as well that you write that subject line briefly but directly to the point, so that when people begin reading it, they know, okay, we're addressing this issue that's come up in the business. Okay, letters are kind of going by the wayside. So those are often sent outside the organization. Typically inside your organization, you'll use emails and memos, but outside, letters. Now, sometimes it's still emails. For example, when you apply for a job, you'll probably email your materials. However, you still want to put your cover letter in letter format, right? So just because it's going to travel through the air doesn't mean that it should be in a different kind of format. So let's talk about letters. You know, in the olden days, I remember sending out, when I was trying to get my first teaching job, and I sent out my cover letters, and I had these manila envelopes, and I had my cover letter, and I had my resume, and it was all printed out, and I would put them in the manila envelopes. I would kiss them before I put them in the mailbox for good luck, right? But it would all be printed, and it would all go through the mail. Most recently, when I was applying for my job at UES, I would attach the cover letter and the resume to an online application. Prior to that, I had only ever done it, you know, sent these materials through the mail. But so now often you submit them in electronic form. However, the format still matters. So when you're writing a letter, you really want to write it in business letter format. So I'm going to show you an example in a minute. Actually, I'll just pull up the example now so we can take a look at it, and I'll talk about the parts of it. So I'm going to show you let me share my screen. I'm going to show you, if I can, where could it be? Here we go. This is the letter that I sent when I applied for the Student Services Counselor position at UES. So you'll want to have your return address. Now, you can either put that in the upper right-hand corner, or you can put it over here. Typically, we put it in the right-hand corner with the date underneath. And then you will also put the addressee. So who it's going to, who they are, their position, and then their full address. I realize that you might be looking at this and thinking, well, that's just silly because this person knows where they are. I don't make the rules, folks. This is just the way business letters are written. All right, you'll have a salutation. And then you want to have, very much like any other piece of writing, you want to have an introduction of some kind. So if it's a cover letter, then you might write your purpose in composing this letter, right? And then a line about why you're a good candidate. So as you can see, it's short, right? But even if you're writing for another purpose, you should always have some kind of introduction that sets the context for the person who's receiving the letter. Then you dive into the meat of the thing. In terms of a cover letter, that's where you would dive into your experience and your skills and how they would benefit you in this particular position. So in mine, I wrote about how I was hoping to get this particular job as the counselor, and then I threw in that I was a Furman grad, always helpful. But then I said a little bit about what I'd done before and ended with some of my skills. And then I went and elaborated on specific examples of achievements or actions I had taken at work that would be beneficial in this particular position. So I did that for a couple of paragraphs, and then you want to conclude, right? Here, I just reiterated the whole idea that I went to Furman and I know what Furman is. And so, but you could also just write there in conclusion and go back to your skills or what it is that you're excited that you could bring to this new position. And then you'll sign it with your full name. If you are enclosing any items at the bottom here, you can write enclosure. Actually, you would put it right down here. Enclosure, resume, proposal, reference letters, whatever it is. The thing about a cover letter and most letters is that most letters should be one page, and that includes all this jumbledy stuff at the top, right? After a page, I'm not sure we're really reading anymore, okay? So no matter the context, about a page is what you're going for in a letter. Now, some business letters it's gonna need more because there are certain elements that are requested within the letter and you have to make sure you hit all those. That's fine. But generally speaking, about a page is right. Okay, now back. So, so there you go. There's all the little bits and pieces of letter writing. So when you're writing the letter, just make sure that the letter represents you. Or if you're writing the letter on behalf of your business, that you represent the business. So you always want to make sure that you're clear, respectful, specific. Choose your words carefully. I'm going to say that so many times. I know I've already said it so many times, but choose the words carefully. Make sure they're the best word that you know of for your purpose. Make sure that you use paragraphs that each focus on one idea. So in your cover letter, for example, it might be that you've held 2 positions prior that you think would be beneficial to this position. You have a paragraph for each. Or there are 2 skills you have that you want to emphasize with examples, a paragraph each, right? And then make sure that you proofread, right? If you send a letter and you didn't proofread and there's errors all over it, you've lost your credibility. Okay, why will they? Yeah, don't do that. Okay, a business proposal. Okay, so business proposals, I think they're kind of fun, but then again, I'm someone who loves research papers, so, take it with a grain of salt. So business proposals are persuasive. Up to this point, we've talked a lot about informing, like a memo is meant to inform the audience of something. An email is often to inform or to ask a question. A letter is often to inform. There's a little bit of persuasion in it if you're writing a cover letter, for example, but often the letter is there to explain or to inform. A business proposal is to persuade. You're trying to make your case for your idea. And so there are various elements to a business proposal. You want to have your idea. It's either a solution to a problem or just a new idea you have for a change. And then typically in the proposal, there are multiple sections. So I'm actually going to pull up the textbook so we can look at that together. I don't know why I didn't just stay on my shared screen. But... Okay, here we go. So typically a business proposal will have the cover page. That's a tile page with this basic information. and then an executive summary. So this is a summary of the product or service. So this is basically the SparkNotes version of your proposal. And I would suggest you write that part last. Go ahead and write out the whole proposal and then say, okay, let me do all that in a paragraph. And that's the executive summary. The background, you want to give a little bit of history. You know, why this change is necessary, for example, and then the proposal. Now, what you have here is really well done. Who, what, where, when, why, and how. Clear and concise, but answer all the questions. A market analysis is often helpful if that's appropriate for your proposal. So where does this fit in with competition? And then you want to go through the benefits, right? What are the benefits of this change? You may even go ahead and address the risks and then explain how you plan to respond to those. That's optional. And then you want a timeline and a marketing plan. So how are we going to roll this out? You'll always want to address the finances. What are the initial costs? How long do we think it will take to get, to start making money? And then conclude, right? I don't know about repeating the main points. In this case, maybe so. You definitely want to tie them together with a common theme. Oh, it says common them. Talk about typos. And then make your proposal memorable. Now, don't do anything crazy. You don't have to write a poem at the end. But just end with confidence. In all your writing, you want to exude confidence. Because if you believe it, it will help other people believe it too. So I don't have exactly an example to show you of one of these, although you can link to one that's in here. Want to be professional, all these things. But I did write one of these recently for Furman for the Workday project. But we'll look here, right? So this is a really long one, right? It's got cover layer, the background, and so it has a table of contents because it's so long. Right. I recently wrote a proposal, and much shorter. It basically is a change or a proposal for a change management strategy to move to a new operating system for Furman. So I had the background, and then why we were doing it, and then what the benefits would be. I went through all the different stakeholder groups, talk about what the risks and benefits would be for each one. I provided a timeline and a chart of what we're going to do, and then also a summary of how to market. So I went through all these, and that one is probably maybe 5 pages long. So when you see this business proposal here, this is really long, but you want to be thorough. So you want to be thorough and yet still concise. So don't write too much, but make sure you hit it all. It's the worst, right? I wish I could tell you exactly, but alas. Okay, so those are business proposals. Let's see if I can get our textbook back up here. Reports. Gosh, every time I see the word report, it just takes me back to book reports in elementary school. Which, I mean, yeah, there's lots of different kinds of reports. These are really going to be specific to your industry, whether it's an informational or an analytical report. So my advice to you is just to look through this particular piece of the chapter and look at this list in particular. What kind would you most likely be taking on? But the organization of a report is pretty standard. They vary, but typically these are the elements. So who the report is about, and for whom it has been prepared. What was done, the problems, the results, including conclusions or recommendations. Those are really important. You want to mean something. Where the subject studied occurred, when it occurred, why the report was written, including under what authority, for what reason, or by whose request, and then how the subject operated, functioned, or was used. So these are the 6 key elements. It doesn't mean they have to go in this order. It doesn't mean they can't be combined. You just want to make sure that you hit these things in there, unless for your purposes it's not appropriate to do so. There's a little more in here, but I think it's okay. And then finally, the resume. Actually, I guess it's not finally, but I'm excited about it. Okay, so Many of you, I would say almost all of you, have probably made a resume at some point, but there are some mistakes that people make in resumes that I want to go through. First, we'll start with the main parts of the resume, right? You can find all kinds of templates for your resume. Typically, I would never recommend choosing a template that has some kind of flourish or like a picture on it, like a bunch of swirlies or like a unicorn up in the corner. Like, don't pick that. You want to look professional, unless, I don't know, you're applying for a job at Disney World and you find one that has Mickey ears on it. I mean, they probably love that. I would love that. But typically speaking, we're going for rather plain. I mean, you know, a nice purple line somewhere is fine. That's not what I mean, but nothing too fancy schmancy. Sometimes you're going to see these resumes too, that the templates have all kinds of columns and segments. The point of the resume is not to impress somebody with your formatting abilities. The point of a resume is to show them who you are and what you have to offer. So don't choose a template that has so much going on that it's not clear. Okay. Contact information. Always make sure that it's updated. Okay. You always use your full name. Even if you go by a nickname, you'll be able to clarify that at some point, so don't even worry about it. Make sure you have your primary address there or your email. I think this is so funny when I read this. Don't use unprofessional email address like sexylover93@hottamale.com or tudifruity@yahoo.com. If you don't have a personal professional email address, then I recommend you go to Google tonight and create one that's like first name period last name @gmail.com, or mine has my initials in it, mpcoon02 at whatever. But create a professional one so that so you're not judged on that. Okay, the objective. I know that there are some employers who, if there's not a clear objective on the resume, they just put it aside. People also agonize over the objective, and you don't need to, right? My objective was always to obtain a position teaching high school English. It's fine, okay? Everything doesn't hinge on the objective, but it is very helpful to have it because the person looking at your resume needs to know exactly what it is you think you're gonna do there, right? Your education, you wanna put it in reverse chronological order. So if you, when you finish your UES degree, then you will start with Furman University. And then you can, that's most of the time, that's all you're gonna need on there. You don't have to go back to high school. You'll just have college. If you're creating a resume before you finish your Furman degree, then go ahead and put Furman on there with your anticipated graduation date. And then under that, you can put your high school. Your work experience, you also want to put that in reverse chronological order. You don't have to put every job you've ever had forever. You want to put the relevant positions. Now, if you haven't really had a career yet, then do put some recent job experiences that you think would allow you to highlight some of your skills. Okay. There are other options for your resume. I'll show you mine in a minute. There are a couple other things. Depends on where you're applying. And I'll explain that when I pull up my resume. To maximize your scannable resume content, because let's face it, a lot of times employers pull out the resumes, they look over it, and they're done. It's pretty quick. No one's gonna like devote their entire afternoon to looking through your resume, right? So you want to use keywords. So words have to do with leadership. Words have to do with communication. Words that have to do with responsibility, reliability, right? Think about what you want to emphasize about yourself and make sure that you choose those strong words. Okay, you want to follow directions. So if there are specific skills they're looking for in the job description, make sure you mention those. You can put in a keyword section if you want. Sometimes people use this with the objective. I'll put to obtain a position as whatever using my skill. Make it easy to read, which we already talked about it. And then, I mean, look at this beauty. That's just straightforward. Okay, these are some sample formats. In terms of references, I typically write references upon request, or you can put the references on a separate sheet of paper to put in there, because your resume would ideally be 1 page on the front, but no more than 1 page front and back. Alrighty, let me show you mine. Okay, so here's the resume that, this is just my updated resume. I always have an updated resume ready to go so that I add things to it when I know that they're fresh in my mind. So mine has some green line on it, but nothing really fancy. All right, so it should have your name and your contact information. I wouldn't suggest using a work email address. I just put this one on here because it's what you guys know, but I would put my personal email address. A summary, you can either have a summary or an objective. You can have both if you really want. We talked about the objective. I prefer a summary because I think that's where you can really summarize who you are and what your skills are right out of the gates. So pay attention to what you're asked for. If you're asked for an objective, make sure you have one. It's okay also to have a summary. So here I get in there my experience and some skills right at the start, right? Then we go into work experience, and this is my reverse work experience. So, and I did it by employer. You can do this by position. You can organize it how you want. I did it by employer. So I have Furman, my self-employed, and then when I taught high school. I have a section for publication because that's something that I've accomplished I'm very proud of, but you don't have to have that, obviously. And then education. And so this is reverse. Actually, this is not reverse. For this one, I didn't do it in reverse chronological because I wanted Furman to be first because I was applying for a job at Furman. But typically, these would be reversed because I got my master's most recently. I put awards on there for my previous career as well as some community leadership because I wanted to emphasize my ability to network with folks outside of just my place of employment, right? So mine's front and back. I could probably honestly edit some of it down now too, but that's for another day. Okay. Alrighty. So the last thing is a sales message. And a sales message is another example of a persuasive message. And it wants to basically to close the sale. So you want to employ ethos, pathos, and logos, which we've talked about before. Typically, for a sales message, you'll have an intention statement. It can be funny, it can be surprise, it can be unusual. You know, I can't help but think of like the worst example. Okay, well, I shouldn't say that, but my son yesterday was singing, "It's raining cars, hallelujah, it's raining cars," from the Gilstrap family dealership, because you heard that on the radio, right? It's catchy. My family has serious feelings about those commercials, but by golly, we know who they are and what they sell and where they're located, right? So an intention statement. Now, it doesn't have to be jumping up and down and confetti flying through the air. It can be humorous, or it can just be, hey, you're overdue for this, right? So, so you just want to make sure you have an intention statement. And then the introduction, which is an appeal and a purpose. The body, which is where you will throw in your credibility, comparisons perhaps, addressing any concerns. Excuse me. I know this is really exciting stuff. And then your conclusion, where you want to sum it up, and that's where your call to action will be. The residual message, which we've talked about before, is what remains. So make sure that at the very end, you guide them to the next step. So if at the end you need people to order something from you, then the last thing you shove on there is exactly how to do that, whether it's calling or a link to an order form, whatever it is. Okay, so that's the sales message. Okay, So I've got a question for you guys in the forum, and then you're going to be doing some writing. So excited. So for today, you are going to compose for me a business email. Remember, this can be short. Okay? A business email is 1 to 3 paragraphs. It can be on any topic you like. You can even take one that you've sent before and then redo it and send me both if you want me to see your revisions. But I just want to see a business email. A cover letter for a new job. So similar to my cover letter, right? You can decide what position you want it to be. If all else fails, then you can write it for the position you're in now, but I want you to practice the cover letter. And then also a sales message of some kind, and have fun with that one, right? If you really need to write one coming up soon, then by all means do that. But you can also have a little fun with the sales message. And so that's your assignment for this week. And also I will say that at the end of this course, you're gonna need to give me your resume. So if at any point you want me to look over your resume in advance, this would be a good time to do that too. Right, so you'll need to do your forum entries and then your activities. And I'm really excited to read them. I'll give you some good feedback on them as well. Let me know if you have any questions. And I hope you guys have a wonderful week.